All right, welcome everybody. I think we got a real treat for you today. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Hornady Lock-N-Load ammo plant. This is essentially Hornady's progressive press they offer. They offer it either as a press or a whole kit. I actually got the whole kit that included a case feeder, bullet feeder, a few more accessories. So we're going to be taking a look at it today, specifically for the purposes of precision rifle application. This won't be as much of a review about the functionality as much as the results it produces. I think it's something definitely surprised me, made me be a little bit more introspective about my loading processes. It was a real learning experience for me, and I think it'll provide a lot of good insight for those of you looking to either save time or make your process easier for the precision rifle loading side. So stay tuned. So as we mentioned, I really wanted to run a test on this progressive press for the purposes of precision rifle application. Over the last year, I've gotten a lot more involved in the, I guess what you call the PRS style shooting, both at the local level, the national level, 2-day matches for the Precision Rifle Series or the National Rifle League. And so with that comes the practice involved and just a lot of rounds downrange through a bolt gun. And even better, I got my wife involved. However, that pretty much doubles the amount of reloading you got to do. And frankly, with a single stage, man, it got to where I just dreaded being at the reloading bench. Talked to some friends, figured out some guys that are actually running on progressives. Something I wanted to try. Obviously, for some of you at home, you know the initial thought there is, can you really get the kind of precision you want on a progressive press? So I'm about to take you for a ride. So in my day job, I'm actually a scientist. I do research and development for a food company. Spent a couple years in grad school where you learn all about experimental design. And with that, this is still going to be very rudimentary, but I actually set out, typed up kind of a rough outline that I wanted to stick to regardless of what happened. I was not going to mend any facts or try to bend the results to meet my will. So I want to walk you through what I'm going to do. So first off, I'm going to actually load 100 rounds on my progressive here and on my single stage from my, actually my wife's 6BR. Just turned out that's what I decided to use for this study. So to give you a little bit of my parameters, I've got a load, and I'll put up a picture here, but I went and load tested about a week ago. She's got a newer action that just broke in, a newer barrel, sorry, that just broke in. So I went to do a load workup before I wanted to run this test. I'll put up a picture of what the groups were. Pretty good group, and my load with that is it's a 6BR Lapua brass 110 grain SMKs, 29.8 grains of Varget, and 0.018 thousandths off the lands. Now, that group there that you see, this was done indoors, indoor 100-yard range we have here, and the ES over just those 5 shots, and though not the biggest number in the world of shots, but the ES was 7. I mean, I was like, all right, that's a solid group that's going to be fair to both presses, all right? So the way I will treat the reloading process, basically I've loaded about 4,000 rounds-ish through the progressive press. I've probably loaded in the neighborhood of 7,000 to 8,000, if I remember correctly, through my single stage press. I'm going to use the process that I find not necessarily the fastest, but the most efficient and reliable, that I think I trust my ammo and I'm doing the best I can. Okay, so what did I take out of my process? When it comes to comparing the speed of both presses, I took out of that speed anything that wouldn't be affected by either one. So what would I mean by that? My dies will be set up for each press ahead of time, right? Like I'll have my seating depth set, I'll have my sizing depth set. The brass will be already clean. The brass will be already free of the cleaning media, but it will not be sized, it will not be lubed. The lubing will happen, the sizing will happen, the depriming, and all the way through seating on the clock. But as far as the setup of the dies, that is actually going to be done off the clock. And the processes that I use for each one will actually be the processes that aren't necessarily the fastest I've found. Well, frankly, on the single stage, as you'll see in the video, I think that's about the fastest I can get. But this was a learning experience for me. I hope it's a learning experience for y'all. But the best part of this is we're actually going to put up a thread for this video on the website where this video can be discussed. If there's anything y'all think I can improve on my processes or help any other readers or viewers out, please feel free to go on that thread and let's talk about how I can get better. Now, for the progressive, like I said, it's a little bit newer to me. I've only had it since August. And the one thing you'll notice I'll talk about in the video is that I don't do the whole thing in one fell swoop. I essentially divide my process up into two parts. I have my reasons for that. Obviously, that could be improved. And then I use my, I don't use an auto thrower, I use my auto trickler to weigh out my individual charges. So that'll be the processes, and with that I'm going to take you to a time lapse and a discussion of both processes of the reloading of these presses. So here you'll see we have the side-by-side time lapses of my single stage process on the left versus my progressive process on the right. So as you can see, I'm going to start out here on the left lubing and sizing my brass. This is also depriming but not repriming. What you're watching on the right now is me actually having to hand pick up one by one the primers to go in the primer feed tube. This is a process that takes me about 4 minutes. Unfortunately, I did not realize that there is a tool that Hornady provides that will load that up in about 15 seconds. So that's a little bit of a negative for the one on the progressive side. As we all know, single stage, when you're hand priming, you can load one of those trays. As a matter of fact, it's just making sure all your primers are in the same direction and flipping it over. So that all being said, now you can see one thing that you'll probably notice up front is how kind of manual. I'm doing a lot of standing, sitting, a lot of reaching out. Just a very manual process for the single stage, where the right side, once I get my brass lubed and dump in the brass feeder, it becomes a fairly automated process. It's just a lot of hand up and down, but usually I sit for most of the actual running of the press, so the progressive being a pretty a much more ergonomic process, a little bit more enjoyable. As you see on the right here, I'm only about halfway through my brass currently in the single stage, where for the progressive, it's once I got that primer going. And one thing that I forgot to mention was that there was a little bit of a hang up trying to get there's a pin there that if you notice on the back side of the press, it's a rod that makes the shuttle for the primers function, and had a little bit of a hang up trying to get that thing working, because usually I turn that off. I pull that out while I'm seating. So something you'll notice about my process on the progressive that does cost me time is I do size, deprime, and reprime in one step, and then I'll charge and seat in the next, and you'll see that portion coming up. That's something that probably does cost me some time. I think I calculated it watching this video earlier, and if it's something that I was comfortable doing all in one fell swoop the way a progressive is designed, it would probably save me about 10 minutes per 100 round, maybe 12 minutes per 100 rounds. But frankly, as you can see, now I'm already charging and seating of bullets. So it's something where it just gives me less to think about if I do it all in my current format. But, you know, that does slow me down as compared to what the progressive is capable of doing. So to explain what I am doing in my progressive style. So for both of these, I've loaded probably a few thousand rounds, probably 4,000 rounds on the progressive, maybe closer 6,000 to 7,000 rounds on the single stage since I started reloading. And so I'm doing the fastest process that I've come up with to date, fastest and most reliable for each. So what I'm doing on the right, basically when the press is in the up position, I'll dump my powder. As you can see, that powder funnel die. And then as it goes down, I'll put a bullet in that brass that now has powder in it, and it'll index around until it gets in the seeder. And the process starts all over again using my auto trickler, where on the left, basically, I take a charged brass, if you will, with a bullet in it. I set it in my die and set it in my press and push the press to the up position. I set my funnel cup on the scale, And while it throws, the very beginning of the throw, I go ahead and seat that bullet and pull it back down. What that does is while that auto dumper is working, auto thrower, that is when I cause the vibration in the table. I need an upgrade for either one of these processes and getting that scale up on an independent shelf. But for now, this is how it'll work. Um, but then what I do is basically, while it is fine, trickling the last little bit, I'll put a bullet inside of a charged brass, pull the seated cartridge out of the press, put the newly charged shell in the press and run it to the top with doing as smooth and as little shaking as possible, and the process starts all over again. So one thing I think you'll notice is similar to the sizing of brass is just I'm doing much less physical work on the right. So yeah, I think I'm keeping up. I mean, it's hard for y'all to keep count, but I'm keeping up on the single stage. But man, I'm working a lot harder. I sat down for about an hour just to let my back quit hurting immediately after taking the single stage video here. But I mean, it is something that is capable of being, well, I guess with my two processes, it's capable of being just as fast with the single stage, but it's a lot more work. Another thing that I mentioned with the scales being not stable since they're on the same table as the press is that progressive creates a lot more movement in the table, and I think that actually slowed down the scale a little bit as the scale's having to stabilize itself before it's willing to say it's finished. One other thing you'll notice is that as soon as a shell is completed on the single stage side, it ends up right in the box. Part of my parameters were obviously the time ends when there's 100 shells in the box, essentially ready to walk to the range. So the fact that on the progressive side it dumps into the big Hornady tray there, and then I have to manually put them in the box separately. That is another little thing that's a little bit of a disadvantage for the progressive. But definitely ways that I could speed my progressive process up as I gain comfort with the process. For the single stage, it's a little bit hard. Finally, the last thing you'll probably not notice is there's a spring in the mechanism that loads the brass onto the brass feeder plate, and that spring's a little bit weak. So I struggled with that, having to kind of manually move that as well. But overall, pretty similar times, just a lot less work on the single stage side. So as you can see, some pretty surprising results there. The single stage actually won in speed, I'll basically I'm going to talk you through all the data I found, and then we'll come back with a conclusion. I can tell you what my thoughts are on those specific results. But first, I'm going to actually put these numbers up for you. So a couple of measurements that I took to compare. I took my seating depth over all 99 rounds is what I'm going to compare from each one. And then I took my speed of my ammo over 20 random rounds picked out of each lot of 100. Picked 20 rounds, and I went and tested speed. Also, out of those 20 rounds, as I was measuring the lab radar, I actually shot 5 3-shot groups from each lot. So what will I compare? I'll have my seating depth over all 99 from each lot, speed over 20 from each lot, and 5 3-shot groups from each lot. So let's start off with my seating depth. So as you can see, my average there was a little bit off from each other. Basically, I just didn't do, apparently, a little bit rusty on the single stage, didn't do the best job in the world hitting the exact target I wanted. But regardless of what happened, kind of like shooting a load test, for this specific measurement, I didn't care so much about hitting bullseye as I did the consistency. As you can see, 9 thousandths ES of seating depth on the single stage versus 13 on the progressive. When you really look at the statistical weight of that, I look at my SD and I realize that it's 3 10,000ths difference SD between my progressive and my single stage. I just don't think that's going to be enough to matter. I do wonder sometimes though, especially as when the shell holder starts running low, like let's say, you're getting down to the last 3 or 4 or 2 out of every lot that you reload through here. I wonder if the shell plate holder gets off base. Once again, that's just a theory, but I think that can affect the amount of pressure that goes up for seating your depth, the seating depth of your bullet. But other than that, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like a very significant number. All right, so to talk to you a little bit about what happened at the range. Got out there this morning, it was 18 degrees when I got out of the truck and started shooting. By the time I was done shooting those groups, it was already up to it. It had broken 40 just in about an hour and a half, 2 hour time period. And what you're going to find with the speed numbers, I'm going to put the speed up here. So when I shot this load indoors, let's say 70 degrees, 72 degrees, it was actually pretty warm down in that basement range. My speed was 28.84 average with a 7 foot per second ES. My speeds this morning on both the single stage and the progressive press were down, like all the way down. As you'll see, my minimums are 27.17 and 27.25. And for about the first two groups, let's say the first 6 to 8 shots, those speeds stayed down under 27.40, which is actually my average for both of them. And so I know that ES of 41 and 39 look big, but let's be real, that's over 20 shots. A lot of us try to do 5 or 10. I think you'll find no matter what load you're going to do, you go up, obviously you just have more of a chance of getting that bigger extreme spread. However, once again, what I want us to focus on here is the consistency. Single stage versus progressive. The ES difference was 2 in the favor of progressive, mind you. So single stage versus progressive, once again, I don't know how much each press would affect my speed, but what I'm getting at here is if we think about the perspective that everyone tells us, the progressive just won't handle the precision the way the single stage is. The progressive is definitely not holding you back, right? So we talked about there wasn't a whole lot of difference in seating depth. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of difference in my speeds. I think we can all agree with that. Not saying the progressive wins, but the progressive definitely doesn't lose. So I'm going to put up another number for you here. Group size. But before I do, I want to talk about one thing. Some of you are going to look at the single stage versus the progressive seating depths and go, there's no way those groups are going to be fair. You're 6 thousandths off on your average. Your extreme spread across all of them is 15 thousandths when you're only jumping 18 thousandths. Well, to combat that, luckily, the progressive was actually, let's say, a shorter bullet, seated farther on average than the progressive. So actually what I did, I took the 20 rounds that I randomly picked out of the box of the single stage. I came back in here, moved my die down, my micrometer die down another 6 thousandths and reseated those 20. Okay, actually 25. I wanted to be prepared. I seated 25 in case, just had a crazy flyer, had a dud, had speed mess up, whatever. So I came in here, bumped those 25,000 down 6 thousandths. Why did I do that? Because for group size, obviously I'm assuming that with my scale, my weight should be the same. For group size, I wanted the depth from both to be the same as well, because let's be honest, what would the difference have been if I'd have just gotten 6 thousandths right the first time? Okay, so I did do that before I shot group size, and here's what happened. So, as I mentioned with my speed earlier, I've lost 40 to 50 feet per second out of what looked like a really great node. Looking at my groups here, it looks like what I did was dropped all the way out of that node, almost into another node. Like I mentioned, for groups 1 and 2 on both presses, groups 1 and 2 were shot in the really cold where my speeds were actually lower. Didn't realize Varget was temp sensitive, as it seems to be in this test. And then as the speed went up, actually both groups opened up. I think that speed started climbing even farther out of a node. But at the end of the day, so let me walk you through how I shot these groups. I shot group 1 on the progressive, gave it about a minute, and shot group 1 on the single stage. Then I actually put my rifle cooler, the Magneto rifle cooler that we'll be doing a review on as well, put that rifle cooler in and let that sit for 4 or 5 minutes. It's 18 degrees outside. I'm forcing air through there. My barrel never got hot. What I didn't want is a hot barrel effect in either one. But what I did do now is for groups 2 from each press, I actually started with the single stage, then turned around a minute later and shot the progressive. I wanted to alternate, make things as even as possible, so group 2 and 4, I shot the single stage followed by the progressive. Groups 1, 3, and 5, I shot the progressive followed by single stage to try to be fair. It isn't like I shot all 5 of single stage in the cold and then progressive as it warmed up. I tried to make this as balanced as possible. And what you see here is that the progressive actually wins. Now, I don't know if I'm going to call, with 3-shot groups, I don't know if I'm going to call 0.15 MOA significant, but kind of, right? I mean, you've got 3/8 guarantees versus half guarantees in companies, right? I mean, I think that's viewed as fairly significant, that much difference. So, as you can see in the middle, to note, these are center to center groups, and group 2 on the progressive, that 0.5 MOA group, that had a called flyer in it. Called it the moment it happened. It was the second shot of the group. It wasn't like I was like, oh, that ruined my group. All right. Group 3 on the single stage had a flyer in it. So I thought for fun, what if I remove group 3 from the single and group 2 from the progressive to get 4 reliable groups at 100 yards? Well, the progressive and the single stage, actually the progressive ends up winning by more. Or sorry, still wins by a good bit, a little bit less. So then I said, fine, what if I take the single stage the single stage flyer group out and leave all 5 groups, including that flyer group in the progressive? The progressive still ended up winning by about 0.8. Now, what am I saying by this? I make no claim that your progressive will actually load better than your single stage. I don't. But here at LRO, we want to be unbiased. We want to tell you the truth. Frankly, I was a little bit surprised. I really thought that my system for loading, that the progressive would beat the single stage. It didn't. How could I even admit that to you? Well, it didn't. I need to get better at reloading with the progressive. But what I will also tell you is the progressive has not held me back. I think about the second match I shot, local match, after going to the progressive, I tied for first using fire-formed brass out of the progressive. Insane, right? So what am I getting at? The progressive from a precision standpoint will not hold you back. I do not believe. Some of y'all can test that. Go ahead. I think the progressive does me well. But the main point I want to drive home here, the progressive is just so much better for larger lots. Even if you do it the way I do it. Like I said, I used to come down here, I have ergo mats under me right now, and I would dread loading on this single stage. One weekend, first 2-day match Courtney and I had to shoot, it took me 3.5 nights to reload. Because I'd prep some brass, I'd start hurting, or I'd get bored, I'd walk away. Come back, prime, my hand would hurt after hand priming 300 rounds, I'd take a break. And I had to do things in batches. With the progressive, it is just so easy. Even if time consuming, it's easy, it's ergonomic. And I have just had a blast on this thing. 100 rounds, I don't take a break, ever. I sit down and knock out 100 rounds, start to finish. I get up and go on and I feel like doing other work. I don't have to go lay down on the couch and take a nap. Right, so, man, the progressive for high volume loading, you know, if you're a 300 rounds a year kind of guy, don't buy a progressive. It's not worth the money. If you're a guy that shoots like me, you're shooting a match a month. If you're like one of my buddies that shoots 25 national matches a year plus locals, progressive could probably be of high value. Maybe I'm a pansy for not liking the single stage, but man, the progressive's made life easier. And I think the numbers show the progressive can be just as reliable as a single stage when properly employed. Find yourself a good load. The progressive will run it. Your rifle will never notice the difference, and you'll be off shooting. So with that, I really hope you've enjoyed this. I'd say we call it a review, maybe a comparison. I hope you've liked it. I would love to hear feedback on it, good and bad. I'm always looking to improve. If there's any questions, like I said, there will be a link on this YouTube video back to the thread on our website. I would really love for you to go check that out. Let's talk about it. Also, make sure you go follow our social media pages. We got Facebook and Instagram. It'll keep you updated on this review, many other reviews coming up. And with that, I'm Jose Gardner with Long Range Only. Thanks.